We sailed around the Marmara, still ourselves accompanied by Zodiacs, and as we got in front of the Marmara, we saw the helicopter begin to descend. We sailed on. We began to realise that we were hearing different kinds of explosions, different kinds of bangs, and then we realised that we could hear the crack of live gunfire. We radioed the Marmara, and Captain Mehmet replied. We said, "Should we stick near you for solidarity?" And he said, "We're being brutally attacked, but carry on, and try to get footage out." He wanted us to outrun the telecoms blockade and get out our photographs. What he knew at that point, but didn't tell us, was that already 2 of his passengers had been shot and killed. Now, much has been made by the Israelis of how the passengers on the Marmara responded. They have even comedically suggested that the passengers ambushed them. Well, we simply have to ask, what on earth were your armed masked men doing on the middle of our ships then, if we ambushed you? It's true that the passengers on the Marmara picked up sticks to defend themselves. They have the right of self-defence.
Yes.
It's not personally how I would have responded and what we did on our ship, but I think if an armed masked man landed through my windscreen if I was driving down a country road at night, I'd pick up whatever was next to me. If that was the steering lock or a whacking brake wrench, I'd pick up whatever was next to me to defend myself. And that's what the people on board the Marmara did. The Israelis have said that no other boat was treated to that violence. That's not true. They boarded every boat with violence. They just didn't kill anybody on the other boats. And I think that's simply due to there being far fewer people on every other boat. As we sailed away from the Marmara with our Zodiac accompaniment, we saw 2 helicopters further apart now, and we realised that other boats in the Flotilla were under attack, and we just waited then for them to come for us. At one point the Zodiacs actually peeled away and left us, and we thought perhaps for some reason that we'd escaped, that maybe they were letting us through. But then we saw on the horizon ahead of us another warship coming. In January last year, the Free Gaza boat Dignity was attacked by Israeli warships, and it was rammed 3 times, deliberately hit, and later sank. And we thought they were going to do the same again. The warship sped at us, swerved, moved away, sped at us, swerved again. Clearly just some kind of psychological tactic to frighten us, because they didn't hit us. But they did launch, eventually in daylight, they launched the Zodiacs at us, just at the beginning of daylight, about an hour after the attack on the Marmara. We decided that the only way we would resist would be standing on the decks, and there were 17 of us on board. 10 of them were women. Young women from the age of 26 to 68, stood on the lower decks, resisting only by putting their arms out, resisting with their bodies. I was on the flybridge with Kate McCall, journalists from Sydney Morning Herald, so I was on the upper deck and had a view of what was going on below. The soldiers approached in their Zodiacs, 6 of them, masked, all face masks, all in black, only their eyes showing, all heavily armed, with a variety of weapons vests, looking very intimidating, armed masked commandos, and before they even attempted to board from the sea, they opened fire with rubber bullets and started throwing stun grenades and tear gas. So there were a lot of explosions, a lot of noise, a lot of tactics to disorient us. The women on the lower decks were peppered with rubber bullets. They were all covered in bruises. The windows of the ship were broken. The women on the lower, as the soldiers came aboard, the women on the lower decks were all tackled face down into the glass, clipped with cable ties behind their backs, and 2 of them were hooded, Guantanamo style. One woman, we actually thought she'd been shot with a live round because of the amount of blood. She was hit in the face, we think with a sound bomb or tear gas grenade, because her nose was bloodied and her face here was burnt. Because of the amount of blood from her nose and the seawater, we actually thought she'd been shot with a live round. People were screaming, frightened, understandably very upset. The soldiers came to the upper deck. Okay, might be telling a story. She immediately identified herself as an international journalist, and they tased her. And they knew exactly who they were, because they were Australian citizens themselves. We had 3 Australian accents on the boat among these Israeli soldiers. I'd quite like to know if there were any British among the soldiers. aboard the Marmara. But the violence isn't what stands out in my mind, and maybe that's because I lived in Palestine during the Intifada. I lived there for a couple of years in Nablus, and perhaps because I've seen a lot of death, perhaps that's why it doesn't stand out in my mind, or perhaps it's just because violence, killing on that scale is basically incomprehensible. The strongest memory I have, and the strongest feelings that I have, are about the contempt and the hatred and the humiliation they subjected us to. From the moment the military operation was over, long after it was necessary, right, in fact, until we got on the plane. Even aboard the boat, we were hissed at, screamed at, jeered at, photographed and videoed against our will, and we were quite compliant. We were all sitting in the room on the ferry. We had all our possessions dragged from us, and I don't just mean our bags and our cameras taken out of our hands. They took everything off us in the boat. They took the pens out of the pocket, the watch from our wrists, even pieces of jewellery, excess clothes. I had a jacket, they wouldn't let me keep my jacket on. They took everything except the bare minimum from us. When we wanted to go to the toilet, they made us wait and wait and wait. We had an 80-year-old man on board with urinary problems, and he was told to pee on himself. When we went to the toilet, even the women were made to go with a soldier standing over us, watching us. We were, at that point, when we were taken, still at least 80 miles away from Gaza and from Israeli waters. When we were taken, we were steering away from Israeli waters.